Well, hello, my silky friends. It's that time again. It's Sunday and it's story time. So, today we are going to finish up our Not Guilty November. Wait! Okay, let me just tell you the Leo Frank case, it took everything out of me. The story I was going to tell today is a great one and I still want to do it, but I am sick of this crime. I'm just not feeling it. And here's the thing, if I don't thoroughly enjoy telling a story, then you're not going to get my best. And you all, my lovely friends, you deserve the best. We're going to take a break from straight off crime. So if you like murder, mystery, and a little paranormal, then this is the episode for you because we've got it all. Today, we're talking about Summerwind. So today we're going to talk about Summerwind. Have you ever heard of it? It's one of the most haunted mansions in Wisconsin, and some say the world. Yeah. So today we're going to do 100 years worth of history. My camera's acting squirrely again. Okay. I hope you can see me. Let's get started. Today's hat is fancy. See? Because this is a fancy story. Sort of. Today's tea, I forgot to tell you, I'm back on the chai latte. I'm telling you, I'm addicted. I might need to seek help. Today, we are going all the way back to the 1700s. Yeah, that's where it starts. We're going to be talking about a piece of property that is up in Land O'Lakes, Wisconsin, which is right up there by the peninsula and real close to Michigan. So, beautiful countryside, okay? This is like a little piece of heaven. Well, Jonathan Carver was an explorer in the 1700s, and he went all over Wisconsin, and his diaries do tell us where he was. Now, there will be some contention about this in this story, but suffice to say, Jonathan Carver, apparently there were two warring Native American tribes, and Mr. Carver helps them negotiate a peace treaty. As a reward, he was gifted like 1/3 of that upper area of Wisconsin. That was quite a bit of land. Now, he actually, according to his diary, did not go up that far to where we're going to talk about at the Land O'Lakes. But his children, after his death, started looking for this document that said that he was the owner. Let's fast forward to the 1800s. Somewhere around in here, James Frank was the first person to have a deed to the piece of ground that we're going to call Summerwind. He built a fishing lodge because it was right there on the lake. And this fishing lodge was more uppity, okay? Back in these days, the wealthy people wanted somewhere to go and vacation, get away. So it's not like it was, just an all boys, time of fishing. It was more of a getaway resort. So it was built with that in mind. And it stood there for quite some time. Now, we don't really know a whole lot about the history until 1912 when Robert Lamont bought the fishing lodge. And he thought this would be a great place for an even bigger resort. So he starts building and expanding on this. He adds all these rooms. He adds electricity. They've got running water. They're the first ones to use oil heat. And this becomes known as the Lamont Mansion. Now the men could comfortably bring their wives and families, enjoy the lake, do some fishing. And so it took a little while to build all this. Well, by the time Mr. Lamont and his wife decide to move into the inn, the maids and the servants that they had that were there before them started telling Mr. Lamont, this place is haunted. Well, he kind of just poo-pooed that whole idea because he said just grow up. He just figured they were uneducated, believing in all kind of stuff, and he didn't want to hear a word of it. Until one day, he and his wife were down in the either the kitchen, the dining room, somewhere in that area, and there was a door that led from that room down into the basement. One of the stories I heard was that the day before the big event, he and his wife were sitting there having dessert, as you do after supper, talking, and all of a sudden that door started rattling. And at first it was just a few bumps, and then it just started rattling like it was coming off the hinges. So he grabbed a knife, and his wife was right there with him, and they go to the door because he thinks, okay, somebody is in the basement and they're trying to get up. Now, he doesn't know if it's friend or foe, and she's standing there, and right when he goes to fling open the door, but before the door opens, everything just goes quiet. Okay, so you think maybe that's just a little bit of wind. I don't know. It's a weird circumstance, but it's nothing to get upset about. We shall see, Mr. Lamont. The next night, they're sitting there again, enjoying their after dinner whatevers, and the door starts rattling and shaking, and then it actually flies open, and out steps this person. Now, I've heard two accounts. Most of the accounts say it was a man. Some say it was a woman, but most of them say a man, so that's what we're going with. Mr. Lamont sees this person and realizes that he is not there for any good reason, so he takes his gun, which of course he had on him, and he shoots twice and realizes this is not a person. This is an apparition. Well, that made Mr. Lamont a believer. So he and his wife get their stuff and they move out. Like, they just leave and abandon the whole idea. So that property, the Lamont Mansion, lay dormant for until 1948, until Mr. Lamont died. Now, you want to ask, because he had invested so much money, he had put $100,000 into this fishing lodge in, around 1912-ish, and that would today be like $2.5 million. Well, apparently he could afford to lose it because he never went back, never opened it, and just let the whole thing sit there. So what would make somebody who has invested that much money just leave it? Well, okay, even though this was the time that people were familiar with ghosts, we're on the tail end of the spiritualism movement, so it wasn't a foreign concept, but it wasn't really a society thing, okay? It was kind of embarrassing. You don't want to say I was run out of my lodge by a ghost. Like, that just makes you look stupid in front of your friends. You're more educated than that. So, yeah, they just kept it hush-hush, and I don't know what they told people about the lodge, but they never went back. So in 1948, when Mr. Lamont passed, then the property was up for sale again. Now, I believe that this is the time that the Kiefers bought it. Honey, this house has changed hands more than 30 times. Anyway, the Kiefers buy it, and they, want to have the same vision. Let's make this a lodge and, whatever, hotel. We can make some money off this. Well, they start. Of course, there's problems from the very beginning. Shortly thereafter, Mr. Kiefer dies. Now, there is not a whole lot of record of everything that happened during this time, but the neighbors said that Mrs. Kiefer, she would rent it out, the rooms or whatever, parts of it, from time to time, but she would always stay in the car. She would never go inside. So I think we can surmise from that something did happen inside that house. So once again, Summerwind is just sitting there. Now, by this time, it had gained quite a reputation over the years. A lot of people said it was haunted, so much so that the contractors from the neighboring town, they wouldn't work on this house once they found out what property you were talking about. They would say they'd take the job, and then you give them the address, and they're like, we can't get to that, like, we're really busy. Maybe next year. Everybody who has owned this house has had to try to find contractors much further away or someone who just does not know. Tools would go missing. Appliances and stuff like that, they just break. They stop working, and then voila, they start working again. Lights on and off. I mean, it's just a bunch of craziness, but it's mostly the presence. People are very uncomfortable and they just don't feel right about being in that house. It was somewhere during these years. Now, I don't know if it was the Lamonts or the Kiefers, but I listened to a historian of the area who said that he spoke with someone who lived just across the lake. Now, her grandmother was a little girl during this time, okay, somewhere in the early ages of this. And the grandmother, when she told them this story, she was about 90. Her and a friend were in a boat and they, would see the house over there. It was kind of dilapidated a little bit. It was spooky. People said it was haunted. They were just curious. They wanted to go see the house. So they get in their little boat and they're rowing across the lake. And all of a sudden, a storm comes up like crazy, unexpected. And they get scared. But then they look over to the house and they see this woman standing there on the shore. And she's wearing a white dress and she's got long black hair and she's waving them to come over. Now, I tell you, at this point, I don't know if I would brave the elements or if I'd go to the house. It was a tough choice. Anyway, the woman seemed to be friendly. They pull the boat on the shore, and she's not talking a whole lot. She's just saying, come in. So they follow her into the house, and she brings them into the living room where they're safe and sound. Now, she didn't offer them tea and cookies, so I don't know what that's about. You're not much of a hostess. I'm just saying. Anyway, as the woman lets them sit down in the living room, she starts walking up the steps and she disappears halfway up the steps. Well, the girls are terrified. You can imagine. I don't think I'd ever come in the house to start with. But by this time, the storm didn't look as bad to them as it did. It seemed like it had calmed down a little bit. And they run out of the house and they get back in that boat and they say, we're just going home. We're going to just take our chances. Well, the next day was a nice day. And the girls decided, you know what? We want to go over there and we want to see. Like, we're not sure what this woman, like this whole thing. We want to explore the house now. So they get back in the boat and they're rowing over there and they get fairly close. And all of a sudden they see this woman on the shore again. And this time she's waving them away, saying basically, stop, go back. So the girls were like, okay, we don't know what's going on. They go home. Well, come to find out, the next day they heard that there was one of the workmen over there, somebody at the house, had done gone crazy and was out there just shooting people. This is a documented fact. He did not kill anybody, but it was extremely dangerous. And so, obviously, the woman in white was trying to keep him safe. So I guess she was a good ghost. Who knew? Eventually, Mrs. Kiefer is tired of this place. Honestly, it had been in ruins because it had been sitting there. Nobody's doing anything with it. They can't get contractors. Her husband died, and she's really just letting it sit. And it's dilapidated. In the early 1970s, around 69, 70, somewhere in that area, there was a woman named Ginger who happened to be visiting a friend in that area. And they get to talking about local stuff. And her friend says, hey, Ginger, would you like to go see a haunted house in the area? Ginger's like, sure, I'd love to see it. I mean, what can I say? I'd probably go too. So she gets up here to this house, the old Lamont mansion, and it really is a mess. But she falls utterly in love with it. And she has to have it. Now, according to most records, this is Ginger and Arnold, her husband, Henshaw. Ginger had been married before. She had 4 children of her own. I'm not sure about Arnold. Sometimes people say there was 4 kids, 6 kids. One person even said there's 9 kids. I don't know. Ginger had 4. Now, Ginger and Arnold had a happy marriage. And although you will find this recorded as Henshaw, actually, it has since come out that his first name was Jim, not Arnold, and the last name is Hill. So actually, these were the hills if you were going to look it up in records. For this purpose, I will call them Henshaw because if you study this case, this is what you're going to see. So Ginger talks Arnold, who happens to be a contractor. Now he's got his own contracting business, so they were good to go. She talks Arnold into buying this old place. Her kids are not excited because, like, it looks like crap. I'm not gonna lie. She's determined that she can make this a wonderful, place. They've got all these kids. There's all this room. It is her dream house. So they buy it. They move in, and a few things start irritating Ginger. First of all, she decides that she wants to restore it back to its original beauty, not like modern. She wants to keep it like it was. So she goes through and she looks at some of the wall colors, old behind wallpaper, whatever little swatches that she can find. She's trying to match the color as close as she can to that room. But the strange thing is every time she paints the walls, it doesn't matter how many coats of paint she puts on there, it never really takes. It just kind of fades out to the way it was. So this is weird and expensive. Well, almost immediately after moving in, first of all, Arnold realizes he can't get any help to work on this house. Nobody that ever shows up comes back. So there they are stuck, and they figure, okay, we'll just do the work ourselves. So while Ginger is trying to do what she can, Arnold, on the other hand, is acting really weird. His whole demeanor changes. Where he had a good, loving relationship with his stepkids before, he just got cranky. He just wasn't pleasant to be around. And as time passed, he just got downright mean. So they were all kind of avoiding him. And then Arnold, he's not going to work, okay? He's trying to work on this house, but he's never doing anything. Like, he gets up and he doesn't do anything. And he finds this organ in the house, and he starts playing the organ. And that's all this man does. He will not lift a hammer to do a dadgum thing. All he does is plays this stupid organ. So now they don't have any money coming in. Whatever reserves they have, it's now becoming wintertime, and here they are in a mess. Arnold ain't working. He's playing the organ to all hours of the night. Even though he knows the kids have school, whatever, he just keeps saying that the spirits are telling him he's supposed to play. I'm telling you, I'm fixing to bury you in the backyard if you don't get off that danged instrument. But Ginger was apparently a lot nicer than I am. So she was trying to, just keep the family together and bear it as they're going under financially. Pretty soon, all their lights get turned off, the water. So they're having to haul water buckets from the lake for water, and they're having to use the fireplace for heat. They've now got all of their stuff down in one room. Now, just prior to this, while Arnold still wasn't, that crazy, Ginger had invited some friends over. So as they're sitting in the living room and they're looking around this house and, trying to imagine, I guess, what it's going to look like, all of a sudden she's in the other room and she hears them scream. And so she comes running out there. They're all looking at this apparition. It is a woman in a white dress with long black hair. And then she disappears. Well, her guests, they just up and left. They weren't coming back. Imagine that. Now, also, when Ginger was working on the house, she was in the hallway one day and she hears a man's voice call her name. And so she turns around to see who's in the house. It's not a voice she recognizes. And she sees this male apparition, perhaps the same guy that Robert Lamont saw and shot at. I don't know. Anyway, she sees this apparition and it disappears. Well, she's pretty shaken up. So now you fast forward, your husband's lost his dadgum mind, playing the organ, and now not only is he playing the organ, but he's playing songs that they're familiar with, but he's changing the words to these hideous, hideous things. Like, it's not the right lyrics, and they're just awful. So there they are by the fire, She's trying to keep the kids alive, and there really ain't any food on the table. She had been determined, as people were back in that time, to make things work. I mean, this wasn't her first rodeo. Now, the kids had a pet raccoon, and one day the raccoon got out of the cage, whatever, goes into the woods. And so Arnold is so angry, he's screaming at the kids, and it's nighttime. He's like, go find the raccoon. And they don't want to go outside, but he forces them into the woods to find this raccoon, which they end up finding, and he ends up doing away with that raccoon right in front of them. Well, I think, Ginger realizes this marriage is over. Girl, I get it. So, in the midst of all this, in not having a habitable place to live, her pride breaks down, and she goes to the neighbors, uses the phone, and calls her dad to please come and get her and the kids. So he does. He shows up the next day with a little camper, and they all get in it. And honestly, that is the last time Ginger ever sees Arnold Henshaw. As a matter of fact, nobody really knows what happened to him. Most people say that he went to a mental institution, and I guess that's the legend, the hearsay, whatever. And it sounds like, honestly, he needed to. But you usually don't stay there forever. So we don't really know. Nobody knows what happened to him. But he was never seen by the family again. Oh, but this story gets worse. Yeah. Now let's back up just a little bit, because there are some hauntings in this house that have no explanation of origin. Or do they? Long before the Henshaws moved into this house, people had seen the white lady, the woman with the black hair. I mean, she was a known apparition, I guess, to different people. But where did she come from? Now, at one point, when they were doing some renovation and looking around in the basement, they found, screwed into the stones, there were shackles. Well, this was not like a plantation or anything. Of course, this is Wisconsin, so where did these shackles come from? Okay, the locals say that a woman named Lucy was having an affair. They're not sure who it was with. They don't think it was with Mr. Lamont, but it was somebody. So, somebody attached to this house or in the area, God knows. Because it was vacant so much, I guess anybody could have used it. But it was said that her husband found out about the affair and shackled her in the basement and said, you will stay here till you die. So is Lucy, whoever Lucy is, the ghost? Well, let's go back to the Hinshaws for a second. While they were doing some of this renovating, before Arnold completely lost his crackers, they were like doing something behind a dresser. I don't know if they're painting. Anyway, they find this like little space. I've heard that it was another room. I've heard it was in the floorboards. Something. They found a door of some kind, but it was very narrow, and Arnold couldn't get down it. So he waited till one of the kids got there, and he said, hey, would you go down in this hole? And like he could see what he thought was like maybe an animal remains. And he's like, hey, here, take the flashlight, go down and see what's down there. Well, one of the stepdaughters comes up with a skull. Yeah. It's got long black hair still attached to it, like pieces of it. And they also found an arm bone and a leg bone. But that's all. So now I'm thinking the first thing I would do is what? Call the police. You have found a body in your house. Obviously, it's probably older than you are. But no, that's not what old Arnie did. He just covered it back up. He just said, okay, we're going to put the wood back over this. Just leave it where it's at. Honestly, if I were a ghost and you found my body, finally somebody found me, and then you just like put me back, well, I'd haunt you too, buddy. So I don't know if those are the spirits that, possessed Arnold, but it wouldn't surprise me. So now, Ginger and her family are out. She goes back to another place in Wisconsin. She lives with her family for a little while. gets herself, her life back together. She had actually named this house, the Lamont Mansion, she had named it Summerwind. She sells it to a realtor who is, I don't know, just keeping it for a while. Nobody's doing anything with it. It's still sitting there rotten. So some time passes, and her dad had seen the house when he'd come to get her, and he got to thinking about it, and he's like, man, that house would make like a great resort. Like, that would be a great money maker. It's in a beautiful spot. What a great vacation place, right? Well, he had a son who had recently gotten out of the Vietnam War, and he thought, this is a great project. He knows how to do stuff. We'll make this, our project together. I'm going to buy this house back and I'm going to fix it up. Now, Ginger begs him, do not do this. Like, leave that house alone. His last name was Bober. So Mr. Bober, Ginger's dad, he didn't want to hear it. He was determined to get this house back. He felt like he could make it a success, as everybody else has been so successful. So he and his son, Ray, they start working on the house. And what do you think happens? Tools go missing. Things don't work. Contractors won't come. They hear voices. They see apparitions. It feels terrible in there. So the renovation is not going too great. There's just problem after problem. So one day, Ray, his son, is in the house, and he is like trying to do something or other. All of a sudden, now he's there, he knows he's alone. All of a sudden, he hears two loud bangs that sound like gunshots, and he smells like the smell of a discharged gun. So he runs down the stairs and he goes into the kitchen area, and he sees where the two bullet holes were by Mr. Lamont. This is an actual picture of that door. Now, were those the marks that Lamont made? I don't know. But there's definitely two holes in the door. Anyway, Ray sees an apparition, and he kind of like sees this whole situation of the Lamonts and this apparition and the shooting. So he kind of relives all that. Like, Ray has had enough at this point. He's not going back in the house. So he leaves, he jumps in his van, and he's gone. Now, during the years that after Ginger had left Summerwind, she was so upset by everything that happened. Like, she couldn't wrap her mind around this whole situation. So she started studying the paranormal and hypnosis and just all, ghost related things. She was just trying to understand what had happened to her. She learns the art of hypnotizing people. Now, how she talks people into doing this, I don't know. But anyway, she talks her dad and her brother into letting her hypnotize them to find out what's going on at that house, like what they saw. And because apparently Ray couldn't remember some stuff. So she hypnotizes Ray. Now, her daughter says as she was watching this whole thing play out, Ray starts shaking violently. And he's in this trance, and he takes on this other persona. And this other persona says something to the effect of, I had 7 children and I despised them all. And then he kept repeating the phrase, you are weak, but I'm strong. You're weak, I'm strong. Yeah. You're dead too, buddy. But that's the way I look at things. After the whole Ray fiasco, she turns around and her dad lets her hypnotize him. Now, during this time, and I've heard this was done under hypnosis, and then sometimes they say Mr. Bober had this in a dream. We'll just say in this dreamlike state, he said that he starts writing, and he signs the name Jonathan Carver. He says that Jonathan's papers that show his land grant are actually behind a stone in the foundation in the basement of Summerwind. And, you have to pull out this stone, and there's this space, and there's a box, and all this kind of stuff. And this is where the paperwork is. So Mr. Bober is determined to go back to Summerwind and look for this paper. They go to exactly where Jonathan said it was, and they pull back this stone that he saw, and lo and behold, there is a space there, but there's no box and no paper. So that was just like a wild goose chase. Jonathan Carver's lying to you. It was more likely a demon, but that's just my opinion. So once again, that is the end of that. The house lays dormant for a little while. Fast forward to the 80s, it's not that far off of the Bobers. So now this house has this huge reputation. So a man named Harold Tracy is looking for an anniversary present for his wife, who apparently loves haunted houses. So for her anniversary, he hands her paper. Here, dear, I bought you a haunted house. Now, isn't that what everybody wants? Her name was Babs. So Babs got her haunted house, and they go over, they look at it, and of course they think what everybody else does. What a nice, beautiful place this would be. What a great place for a resort. This story's getting old. Somebody learned something by now. So they've got these grandiose plans. Now, as they are trying to find workers, because God knows ain't nobody going to work at Summerwind. They all know the stories. And one thing that has always been true about all of these people wanting to restore, the dimensions of the house changed. Now, I have a whole story about haunted house and the house that I'm in now, and I had this exact same thing happen. They would measure a room, sometimes several times. They'd measure, they'd get the exact dimensions, get the materials for the room, and the room changes. It either expands or it gets smaller. Usually, they expand. This was weird. Everybody had this same problem. And you think it's just a mismeasurement. Honey, I can tell you from personal experience, no. It's just craziness. So while they're going through all this, one night, Harold and Babs, they're taking a nice little walk by the lake. They're holding hands, and they look back at Summerwind, and they're just, imagining what a great place it's going to be. And all of a sudden, they see the house move. It looks like it inhales and exhales. Summerwind took a deep breath. Well, if that ain't crazy, I don't know what is. So they had bought the house in 1986, and they are having all these challenges, as you can imagine. And for years, people in the town, like when it was vacant, the kids would go up there, they would party. People were vandalizing. It was just a big old mess, and it was unsafe. And the town had actually petitioned to burn or raze Summerwind. They wanted it completely destroyed because they felt like it was not good things were happening up there. They don't even know what was happening, but they weren't good. It was actually struck down by the town. They had said no, but strangely, in 1988, there came a storm. And people say that lightning struck Summerwind twice that same night and burned it to the ground. Now, that's the official story. The unofficial story, which has been by more than one witness, says that no. People from the town burned that thing down because, first of all, if it had been lightning, there are so many trees so close, you would have had tree damage. That was a controlled fire. Whatever, Summerwind was destroyed. So now all you have are the two fireplaces and this beautiful foundation, and the work in that is just amazing. So where are we today? Well, first off, you have to go by permission, okay? It is privately owned, but it is a hotbed, apparently, of paranormal activity. Oh, and let me tell you this. That skeleton, remember that we talked about? Lord, honey, my memory. When Mr. Henshaw put that back in there, later on, when Ginger's father came, after that whole thing was over, when Ginger's father came to renovate, he thought, I'm going to get that skeleton out of that place. When he opened those boards back up, the skeleton was gone. Yeah. So we don't know who that was. How long it had been there, it's just a big mystery. People still today go up there and they do all kind of EVPs. They see apparitions. I have heard, and all these people saying I've got video of somebody actually walking. It's a big attraction still. There is also a legend that if you take a brick, or I guess I don't really see bricks, but stone, I don't know, if you take a brick or stone or something from Summerwind and you take it off the property, then you are under a curse, and people have major automobile trouble. Actually, that happened to Arnold Henshaw, according to some accounts. Some accounts say that while he was living there and he was getting ready to get in the car, all of a sudden the car just caught on fire. Now, I've only seen that one or two places, so I don't know if that's true, but apparently it's true since then. If you are taking something from that property thinking you're going to have a souvenir, you're going to have a car accident, your car is not going to work, it's going to break down on the way home, whatever. Now, Ginger actually found the blueprints for the original Summerwind Lodge, and then, mysteriously, because they were lost, they appeared again, voila, online. So there is a group of people called the Restoration Society, and their whole mission is to, can you say it? Rebuild Summerwind. Yeah, because wouldn't it be a great place for a resort? Now, they are convinced that the spirits that are there want them to do this. I agree. It was a lovely place. But, just look at the history. What are the chances that you are not going to run into a disaster? But anyway, if you want to get involved and you want to donate, you can find the Restoration Society for Summerwind. It is in Wisconsin, and, have at it. I love this story. I have no desire to go. Nah, I'm good. But I will say this. I do know what it's like to live in a house that has a life of its own. Evelyn Cottage is, I just call her enchanted. But yeah, if you would like to know more about my house, I have some videos that I've done on it on another channel. Just comment below and I'll give you a link to those. So how did you like this story? Is it a good change from the crime? I love crime. I just felt the need to do something different. So we're going to be talking about Merry Scary Christmas, Scary Merry Christmas. I don't know what we're going to call it. We're talking about legends. We're talking about crimes. We're talking about paranormal. We're just going to go all out for the month of December. So if you like this kind of thing, please consider subscribing. I hope your holidays are great. And for heaven's sakes, stay silky.